If you're inquiring about this at this moment, her voice quivered, yet she remained steadfast. Perhaps I have been mistaken all along. Perhaps you only perceived me in that initial instant. He gazed at her, seeking a thread to grasp, yet encountered only the heavy stillness that enveloped them. As she moved on, her gaze remained forward, never once glancing back. That's how she departed, not out of rage, but with a sense of understanding. And that is how he lost the one individual who had never sought anything in return. Only the truth. What unfolds when a man, who has constructed his empire through dominance, comes to the stark realization that the one thing he cannot bear to lose is her. This is not a tale of whimsical starts. It revolves around errors, perseverance, and a love that endures only if it possesses the authenticity to shatter and the strength to reconstruct. If you hold faith in new beginnings and the subtle strength of genuine recognition, join us on this journey. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to ensure you never miss a story that resonates deeply. Let us commence. The distant music resonated softly beneath her skin as Ellie Grace entered the serene ambience of the Sky Lounge perched atop the Halcyon, a luxurious hotel where the ceilings resembled those of an art gallery, and the air was infused with an aura of mystery and wealth. She felt out of place, trapped in this borrowed black dress that hugged her waist uncomfortably, not in these heels that caused her ankles to throb with each stride, and certainly not in this soft, golden light crafted to enhance the beauty of women accustomed to attention. At 24, she felt the weight of her financial struggles, hidden from the world. This was meant to be her sister's role, a short-term position welcoming VIP guests at an exclusive corporate event. However, that morning, Sophie had lost her footing on the subway steps, leaving her ankle swollen to an alarming size. And so Ellie, originally assigned to manage the coat check in the lobby, unexpectedly found herself here, balancing a silver tray while her heart raced, yearning to escape the room. Simply serve the drinks and stay out of the spotlight. Sophie murmured through her discomfort, "You won't need to speak to anyone." Yet, someone took notice of her. He lingered by the balcony windows, a shadow framed by the gentle outline of the skyline, lofty yet composed. He wore a charcoal gray suit, impeccably tailored, while his hands casually cradled a glass that remained untouched. His gaze was what ensnared her, steady, inscrutable, and fixated solely on her. Ellie averted her gaze, yet he was already in motion. He took his time. He remained silent until he was near enough for her to catch a whiff of something fresh and luxurious lingering on his collar. "You're ahead of schedule," he remarked. Her eyebrows knitted in concern. I'm sorry." His eyes remained steadfast. "It was mentioned that you possess a certain level of discretion. Choosing the back entrance, quite clever." A moment of stillness. "I believe there has been an error," she stated with caution. He slipped his hand into the inner pocket of his jacket and retrieved a sleek black card. A gold emblem was elegantly stamped at the center. "Penthouse," he remarked. "In 30 minutes." He then turned and walked away as if nothing required further explanation. Ellie gazed intently at the card resting in her hand. Then observe him, the subtle grace in his movements. His failure to ensure she was keeping up. She ought to have chased after him, set things right, revealed the truth. Just as she was about to move forward, a man in a dark suit appeared in her way, wearing a courteous smile. This is how the esteemed guests are anticipating. She choked on the heavy words that lingered in her throat, yet they remained unspoken. As she turned to depart, a woman in a navy blazer stood in her way at the exit, holding a clipboard and wearing a carefully composed expression. "Ellie Grace." "Indeed. Mr. Julian West has arranged for your onboarding at the Westmore building tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. precisely. You will take on the role of his new assistant." Ellie's hands turned icy. The key card rested in her palm, and deep within her chest, an unfamiliar sensation began to awaken. What sort of individual commits an error of that nature and transforms it into a profession? Perhaps it was merely a dream, a wild and feverish vision conjured from fatigue and a pair of borrowed heels. But at precisely 9 o'clock, When Ellie announced her name at the polished marble reception desk, the woman behind the counter remained unfazed. "Star West is expecting you," she remarked, as though it were the most ordinary occurrence. "Top floor private elevator." As Ellie ascended in the elevator, she found herself enveloped by glass walls that unveiled the sprawling city beyond. The rooftops diminished beneath her, and she climbed to an altitude she had never envisioned for herself, certainly not in this manner. As the doors swung open, she entered a realm of quietude, where plush carpets embraced her steps, sleek lines defined the space, and walls shimmered with an immaculate sheen, a meticulously crafted world. And there he stood, Julian West, positioned at the far end of the room, her back turned, one hand clasping a phone while the other softly drummed a rhythmic tap against his leg. His posture remained remarkably still, perfectly controlled. The identical tailored suit from the previous evening, now complemented by a tie and every strand of hair perfectly in order. He concluded the conversation, pivoted, and locked eyes with her. "You arrived," he remarked. Ellie clenched the coffee cup in her hands, using it as a protective barrier. "I found myself questioning whether I ought to." He gave a subtle nod, a gesture that many would overlook, yet it was precisely the affirmation I sought. He motioned toward a chair positioned beside a sleek, simple table. She remained still. "You perceive me as a different person," she stated calmly, yet a quiet fire simmered beneath her ribs. "I believed he mentioned moving closer. At this moment I do not. A job offer was extended to me in error." "No," he responded. "I extended that to you because you stood strong during your time as misread." She was left speechless by that. He reached for a folder and passed it to her with a deliberate motion. The paper had a substantial weight to it, with a soft cream hue. Straightforward. He stated plainly, "Managing the calendar for correspondence and scheduling. Exercise caution while traveling." She opened it and paused. The figure displayed on the page caused her to gasp, surpassing what she had accumulated over the last 5 years, despite juggling 3 jobs and sacrificing sleep. Yet she gazed upward. "What makes me the one?" Julian maintained his gaze, aware that those in this building either seek to win my approval or deliberately steer clear of me. "You failed to accomplish both tasks. You're not familiar with who I am. And that's the crux of the matter." And so it all started. As the sun set, Ellie found herself adorned with a badge pinned to her blazer, a sleek glass desk positioned next to his office, and a timetable that prompted her to reevaluate every choice she had ever made. The hours stretched on without end, the demands unyielding. Julian maintained a calm demeanor, spoke with clarity, and moved forward without hesitation. If she failed to keep up, he would stride ahead of her. As she elaborated, his gaze sharpened, as if she were an enigma that held no intrigue. Yet the most peculiar aspect wasn't the chill he exuded, but rather the profound silence that surrounded him. He was always discreet, never sought the spotlight, and never engaged in playful banter. He absorbed every word, taking in all that was presented to him. He recalled every detail. During a review of a press release, he took a momentary pause before instructing, "Revise the 3rd paragraph. It strives for an air of confidence but ultimately conveys a sense of apprehension." She crafted a new version. He gave a slight nod. That was everything. Without commendation, there is no grin. Yet, in some way, it sufficed. The remainder of the office maintained their distance. As she walked by, hushed murmurs filled the air, accompanied by smiles that were perhaps a touch too courteous. On a quiet afternoon, she discovered a note resting on her desk. "Without a signature, there is no expulsion. Stay alert. He cycles through assistants as if they were mere coffee filters." She kept it hidden from him. There was no necessity for her to do so. She simply dedicated herself to her tasks. Each night, she took the late train back to her small apartment, sinking onto the couch with tired feet, pondering what it truly meant to endure in a world that seemed to reject gentleness. As Ellie finally pushed open the door to their apartment, Sophie stood there with a bowl of reheated pasta in hand and a knowing smirk playing on her lips. Her younger sister inquired, "Are we giving up yet?" Ellie settled into the couch, gradually unzipping her boots with deliberate slowness. Not yet, because for every impossible demand, for every glance that cut rather than comforted, something about Julian West held her steady. Perhaps it was the manner in which he perceived the world, as if it had scorched him one too many times. Perhaps it was how he embraced silence, not as a void, but as a shield. Or perhaps it was the way he had gazed at her as if she were a stranger yet somehow concluded that she belonged, even if she didn't, whatever it was. Ellie understood one thing. She wasn't here to engage in his game, yet she found herself already on the board. The initial week slipped away in a haze, with meetings piled up like bricks. Names that slipped through her mind, acronyms devoid of meaning for now. She picked it up quickly. There was no other choice. Julian was direct, unyielding, and left no room for elaboration. With him, silence held a sense of anticipation, not emptiness. By the second week, Ellie had become adept at deciphering him in an instant. A subtle change in stance signaled discontent. A quiet movement of his pen signaled that she had to pause the conversation for a moment. He never extended any words of commendation. The sole indication of her well-being was the understated reality that she remained present. She reassured herself that it was insignificant, yet it truly was. Then arrived the gala. She was not given the task. Large-scale events were usually managed by the external PR team. Yet, 2 hours prior to its commencement, Julian showed up at her office door, as sharp as ever. "You're coming with me?" Ellie blinked, setting her pen down. "I'm sorry. You'll oversee the coordination on site," he responded immediately. "My previous assistant would gradually approach Mr. West. I have never experienced that." "You'll be fine," he remarked, already beginning to walk away. Julian was not one to ponder inquiries. He focused on results. That evening, she donned a sleek black dress, elegant in its simplicity. Her hair was secured in a manner that would fade from memory. She stayed by his side throughout everything, clipboard in hand, softly speaking names, updates, and cues. Though her voice remained a mere whisper, he always caught her words. Tension was drawn. They consistently observed when someone positioned themselves next to him. Tonight, the whispers were no longer lurking in the shadows. They stood right before her, mere inches away. "Isn't that the girl from the rooftop at Halcyon? She appeared unexpectedly and now manages his entire schedule. What do you believe led her to secure the position?" Ellie maintained an impeccable facade. She had mastered the art of neutrality, yet within her, something shattered, soft, sharp, radiating like a spiderweb of cracks in glass. As the evening drew to a close, Julian found himself engrossed in dialogue with two impeccably dressed investors. Ellie stood nearby, quietly overseeing the details, when a flicker of movement caught her attention in the periphery. A woman approached the tall, blonde, confident Celeste Wynn, the queen of public relations, the refined problem solver. The sole woman Julian had ever been associated with for over 8 weeks. Ellie had encountered her in magazines, headlines, and whispers, all depicting her as flawless. Celeste acted without a moment's pause. She strode confidently in her heels, each step punctuating the air with a sharp click. A champagne flute dangled from her hand as if it were an essential tool in her arsenal. "You must be the new assistant," she remarked, her eyes sparkling with intrigue. Ellie held her gaze steady, unwavering. Celeste's lips curved, revealing an intriguing nature. "Your expression suggests a fleeting nature, as if you might not endure beyond this month." Ellie offered a faint smile, a touch of humor in her voice as she spoke, low and steady. "You would recognize what that appears to be." Celeste's smile wavered for just an instant, reminiscent of porcelain fracturing under strain, before she leaned closer. Whispers, gentle yet laced with poison. "Exercise caution, my dear. He doesn't hold on to people, he clings to silence. You'll come to understand." Before Ellie had the chance to respond, Julian pivoted away. His gaze darted between them, fleeting and inscrutable, and Celeste faded into silence, her heels resonating like an ominous signal. The journey back was subdued, a silence that resonated more profoundly than words ever could. Julian remained motionless, enigmatic and inscrutable in the shadowy back seat. The driver in the front was enclosed behind soundproof glass. Ellie gazed out the window, contemplating which iteration of herself was observing the city rush by, the girl from Coat Check or the assistant now entangled in a situation she hadn't consented to. As they approached her apartment, he finally broke the silence. You managed her expertly. She shifted her gaze. Was that what this was? She inquired. Once more, he remained silent. She didn't wait for a single one. As dawn broke, all fell apart. A notorious gossip blog, known for its penchant for scandals and speculation, released a photo. A grainy cropped image captured from across the lounge week's back. Julian presented Ellie with a sleek black card. The headline blared across the screen. Tech mogul Julian West, accused of employing an escort under the pretense of a staff position. Her name was unnecessary. It lingered in the air without being spoken. Every detail, the timing, the implication, the dress, led to a singular conclusion. By midday, the murmurs in the office had intensified into piercing gazes. By afternoon, a file labeled HR Review quietly appeared on her desk. As dusk fell, she received a call to ascend to the uppermost level. She stepped into the office, her posture rigid and her breath caught in her chest. Julian lingered at the window, perpetually drawn to its view. One hand rested in his pocket, while the other remained tightly closed, frozen in place. He remarked that you had seen the article. Everyone possesses, his jaw clenched. That is not accurate. No, she responded. Yet, is that truly significant? He pivoted to meet her gaze. Certainly does for me. She crossed her arms, heart racing. You were the one who handed me that card. You were the one who thought I was someone different. I made the necessary corrections. You enhanced it. That hit the mark. She perceived it, not as anger, but as something more profound, a glimmer of guilt. I believed you were another person, he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. And when I came to understand that you weren't, I found myself at a loss for how to mend it without exacerbating the situation. An apology might have been a better way to begin. He cast his gaze downward. Her voice, while composed, carried a piercing edge. What was the true reason behind your decision to hire me, Julian? Their gazes intertwined once more. When I misinterpreted you, you remained steadfast. You stood your ground. You remained motionless. That doesn't provide justification. It is for me. She gave a single shake of her head. It simply doesn't suffice for me. As she turned to walk away, he chose not to intervene. Yet there was a depth in his gaze, an unvoiced truth, that revealed she had accomplished what no one else ever could. She had disturbed Julian West. The days that followed grew colder, not due to the chill in the air, but from the weight of unspoken emotions. He neither dismissed her nor reassigned her, nor did he cut her hours. Yet, a change occurred. The once neutral silence had transformed into something distant, tinged with an unnamed guilt that lingered in the air. Ellie continued to arrive punctually, maintained an impeccable calendar, and crafted each memo with meticulous accuracy. Yet, the glimmers of connection that once existed between them, those brief, transient moments that transformed the task into something beyond mere existence, had vanished until the tempest arrived. It arrived on a Thursday, without any prior notice. A citywide blackout swept in like a tide. The traffic signals flickered off, and the offices closed their doors ahead of schedule. The skyline faded into shadows. The Westmore building activated its emergency power, providing just enough energy to sustain the vital systems. Elevators ceased their ascent. The upper levels fell into silence. While the majority of the staff departed within the hour, Ellie remained behind. A document existed, a deal was struck. Julian was adamant that it must be completed before midnight. You can go, he said, his gaze fixed on the screen. She paused, and then she remained. I require nothing more, Julian remarked, his eyes focused on the contract draft displayed on his screen. Ellie remained still. He kept his gaze fixed downward. Unless you've somehow mastered the art of proofreading legal clauses more effectively than my attorney, he remarked with a hint of sarcasm. She advanced, her chin held high. You misspelled partnership 3 times, causing him to hesitate. He glanced upward. Their gazes intertwined over the table, and a spark ignited. Not quite warmth, but rather something softer, less intense. Wit, a test, perhaps even the framework of a peace agreement. He presented her with the document. All right, go ahead and reveal it to me. They occupied the same space in his secluded office, a table cluttered with documents and enveloped in dim light. The sole illumination emanated from the soft glow of his laptop and the gentle amber strip by the windows. The city lay in slumber under the storm, its lights extinguished by the darkness of the blackout. Within, it seemed like an entirely different realm. At a certain moment, Julian removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and reclined comfortably. He immersed himself in the stillness, his gaze swiftly scanning the words, his fingers tapping lightly for each paragraph that eluded clarity. You always do that, Ellie murmured softly. What should I do, tap? It resembles Morse code. He looked at his hand, then turned his gaze to her. Perhaps I enjoy the rhythm of noise that I can manipulate. She nodded, a sense of unease settling in her chest at that response. Suddenly, he inquired, what was the true reason you chose to remain at the Halcyon that night? Her gaze sharpened. So, after you gave me a hotel key as if I were? Indeed. She reclined, arms crossed, as I stood there, too bewildered to move, caught between the urge to either confront you or chuckle, and a peculiar curiosity about the kind of man who could err so dramatically yet remain so self-assured. Though he didn't smile, there was a softness that crept into his voice. I haven't always been this way, distant and unfeeling. What transpired? He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. There was a time when I placed my trust in another. She marketed that trust as if it were a commodity. Lesson learned, Ellie chose not to push. The silence that lingered between them was not burdensome, but contemplative. I revisited the article once more. He remarked unexpectedly, you showed great courage. She tilted her head, a spark of amusement dancing in her eyes. You've observed something intriguing. You never refuted it. I never believed it was necessary. You don't owe me anything, he said softly. However, you are entitled to understanding. I feel the same way. Ellie placed her pen aside and met his gaze directly, then posed the question that had been left unspoken. Indeed, he did. Have you ever engaged in that type of work? Her voice remained steady. No, not even once. She hesitated for a moment before continuing, but deep down you never really thought I had. Did you? You were merely curious to find out if I could endure the expectations this place had of me. He let out a slow breath. Perhaps I had to hold on to the hope that you were capable of it. She stood, meticulously organizing her notes. It's not acceptable to subject others to harm merely for the sake of curiosity. As she began to walk away, he uttered a word. You did not. Ellie lingered, caught in a delicate interplay of light and darkness. He raised his gaze. Julian remarked, You're not what I anticipated. She pivoted gradually. Neither are you. As the power flickered back to life, the clock approached the stroke of midnight. Julian propped the elevator door ajar for her. It marked the very first occasion he had ever experienced it. In the weeks that followed, subtle changes began to unfold, almost unnoticed. Julian began including her in meetings, not as a note-taker, but as a contributor. Upon the resignation of his communications director, he requested Ellie to take on the role temporarily. It appears you have a knack for navigating through turbulent times, he remarked. She did, and she managed it with a calm and exacting touch. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the weary city, he extended a simple yet thoughtful gesture, an offer to drive her home after a day that had tested their limits. She refused. He was adamant. Inside the car, the quiet felt comfortable. The air was thick with the aroma of leather, heavy with the burden of unspoken words. He was the one to speak first. What draws you to that area of the city? This is within my budget. You have the means for something greater now. She faced him, her tone gentle yet confident. It transcends mere financial concerns. It's about maintaining proximity. The distance from our apartment to my sister's school is 5 blocks. I won't budge until she's finished. I promised her we'd stay until she graduates, Ellie said gently. Julian gazed at her as if he were discovering an entirely new facet, something he had previously overlooked. One doesn't simply turn their back on others, he whispered. There was no response from her. There was no necessity for her to do so. In the stillness of the night, long after the final elevator had chimed and the city had settled into silence, he discovered her peacefully asleep in the staff lounge. Her jacket hung around her like a protective barrier, while papers lay strewn across her lap. One page firmly held in her grasp. Julian chose not to rouse her. He lingered for a moment, observing intently. He reached for the light switch, leaving her in tranquil solitude. Then arrived the acquisition, a significant transaction. Reporters flocked from all corners of the nation. Every element meticulously arranged. Cameras, inquiries, microphones, each detail crafted with precision. Ellie stood behind the curtain, headset in place, clipboard in hand, her steady gaze meticulously scanning the timing of every cue. She orchestrated the turmoil with the finesse of a maestro guiding a symphony of stillness. Julian lingered just behind her, his attention fixed on her rather than the reporters. "You have a real talent for this," he remarked softly. She remained still. "There's no need for surprise." "I'm not." She cast her gaze upon him then. "Is that so?" His voice remained steady, yet it resonated deeply. "I have never felt such unwavering certainty." The words held a quiet power, perfectly sufficient in their subtlety. They hung in the atmosphere around them, delicate and smooth, utterly undeniable. Later that night, after the conference lights dimmed and the crowd had dispersed, Ellie returned to her desk to discover a small box containing a necklace. Uncomplicated, modest, devoid of pretense, solely intended to recognize, and a message, merely 5 words. "Regarding the woman, I made an error in my judgment." She chose not to wear it the following day, yet she tucked it away meticulously in her bag, just in case. The morning unfolded with a familiar cadence. Ellie got to the office ahead of time, went over Julian's agenda, prepared key discussion points for an upcoming investor meeting, and wrapped up his revised travel arrangements. Everything flowed too seamlessly, and it was invariably those tranquil days that unraveled the quickest as noon approached. Julian found himself in a secluded meeting with the board. As Ellie stood outside, she meticulously reviewed a legal memo when her phone vibrated in her pocket. "Sophie, are you all right? What's happening?" Ellie scowled. "Could you clarify what you mean?" Just as she was about to complete her message, another one came through. "Your name is omnipresent. Look it up immediately." As she launched her browser, a gasp escaped her lips. On the front page of the most notorious gossip site in the nation, the headline blared, "Ellie Grace. Allegations suggest an overly familiar relationship with the CEO, raising concerns about an unmerited ascent within the organization." Underneath the headline, a mosaic of indistinct visuals. A fleeting instant atop the halcyon, she stood alongside Julian amidst the gala's splendor. A candid shot captured in an intimate setting of Julian, softly brushing her shoulder. No identities, no affirmations, just suggestion, just venom. The piece was saturated with uncredited remarks. She appeared as if from thin air. No one approaches that closely unless there's an exchange happening. She is controlling him. It was irrelevant that there was no sourcing, that nothing had been substantiated. Perception does not pause for truth. It consumes it whole. In just a matter of hours, her inbox was overflowing. Harsh words, conjecture, scrutiny. As the day wore on, her name began to circulate for all the unfortunate reasons. Ellie remained motionless at her desk. 2 employees strolled past, their voices carrying more than they intended. "Indeed, it is true." One murmured, "It seems we've figured it out." Now spoke the other. Julian decided to call off his remaining meetings that afternoon. She rapped on his door once. Once more, there's silence and still no response. She lingered in anticipation. not due to a lack of strength to depart, but because her silence resonated more profoundly than her very existence. At 6:45, the door finally swung open. He emerged, sleeves rolled up, his expression a mystery. "Ellie," he murmured softly, "step inside." She stood up gradually, while he remained in his seat, his posture poised and his gaze unwavering. Julian stated it plainly, "You've seen it." "Certainly, I've come across it." "Is it accurate?" The question struck with unexpected force, leaving her breath caught in her throat. "Is that really the question you're posing to me?" Ellie's voice held a serene quality, yet an underlying tension simmered just out of sight. Julian reclined in his chair, his fingers interlaced thoughtfully before his lips. "I need to know," he said softly. "If there's something I've overlooked, is there anything I missed? Are you suggesting there's something beyond your current assumptions?" Her voice quivered now, not from fragility, but from the burden of all the control she'd held within. "You assign me a role due to an error," she continued, "but everything else I rightfully earned." I embraced the quiet. And then she said even more gently, "And if you're doubting me now, perhaps I've misjudged you from the very beginning. Perhaps you only perceived me as a fleeting glimpse, nothing beyond that initial encounter." Julian took his time before responding, rising to his feet with a deliberate, hushed grace. He acknowledged your point, saying you weren't mistaken. Ellie opened her eyes wide. "I apologize, I didn't catch your image distinctly. Not at that time, perhaps not even at this moment." He took a deep breath. "However, I always had faith in your efforts, and I never accepted that article as truth. So what's the point of asking?" He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "After years of dedication, I've created something that simply cannot accept uncertainty. To maintain an edge, one must challenge all assumptions." She withdrew. "Only a single step, yet it suffices. What if your doubts are precisely what drove me away?" He remained silent, prompting her to offer him the same silence as she turned and walked away. The following morning, she was absent from the office. By midday, her absence from his calls was palpable. As darkness fell, she had vanished. There were no grand farewells, no sweeping gestures, only a lingering void. She filled 2 suitcases, brought her sister along, and graciously accepted a spare guest room in a serene countryside home provided by a longtime friend. Silence reigns, free from the clamor of urban life, offering a serene space to exhale and reflect. Yet, life continued unabated. The tale, that wretched fabrication, spread rapidly like flames in dry brush. Julian released an official statement, warning of potential legal consequences. The blog published a retraction, yet the harm had already been inflicted. And then, after a week, the truth finally emerged. During the examination of their internal systems, Julian's security team identified the origin of the leak. It did not originate from the external world. It emerged from within, from Evelyn Vale. She had tapped into an old PR channel, one for which she still held the credentials, and dispatched the altered images herself, not for profit but for retribution. She observed Ellie settle next to Julian, a spot she had once laid claim to, and a fierce desire to see her removed surged within her. Upon reading the report, Julian didn't lose his temper. He took action. In just a day, Evelyn's connections to his enterprises were discreetly cut off. Her name vanished from boards, meetings, and partnerships. No lawsuit, no headlines, just a quiet erasure. In their realm, silence served as the ultimate punishment. Yet, none of that could erase the singular defeat that weighed heavily on his heart. 10 days went by, and then he set off alone, without any staff, without a word of warning. As she swung the door open to the quaint lakeside cottage, her bare feet touching the cool floor and her sweater draping softly around her, he found it hard to believe it was her. Not due to her appearance, but because she seemed more distant. "How did you come across me?" she inquired. He mentioned that the lease on the car was still in the system. She moved aside in silence, allowing him to enter. Mia had disappeared, maybe off to school, or perhaps she had chosen to give them some room to breathe. Julian lingered in the stillness. He finally admitted, You were right about Evelyn, about everything. I possess the evidence. Ellie remained steadfast, showing no sign of hesitation or even a blink. The findings were documented in our internal report. You have received full clearance. She gazed at him then, and for the first time, her eyes held no anger, only weariness. That fails to break the stillness. He gave a slow nod. I understand. They remained in that stillness, enveloped by the silence of unspoken words. He acknowledged his lack of skill in this area. I have dedicated a significant portion of my life to navigating uncertainty and shaping how things are viewed. I find myself uncertain about the art of letting go or holding on to others in the most effective manner. Ellie folded her arms across her chest. I never requested for you to hold on to me. I understand, he replied. That's why he hesitated, then locked eyes with her. I'm reaching out to request your return. It's not something you can casually present as if it's merely a suggestion. Ellie spoke softly, the door lingering ajar behind her. Julian responded, It's not a proposal. For the first time since their world fractured, there is a glimmer of hope. She gazed at him intently, noticing the furrow in his brow, the tightness in his jaw, and the unfiltered emotion in his eyes. With a sense of hesitation, she entered gradually, just within reach of the unspoken burdens that lingered between them. Are you in need of some assistance? She inquired. No, a resolver. He shook his head in disbelief. So, Julian, what is it that you truly seek from me? His response followed a moment of quiet contemplation. Time, he remarked simply that. A solitary term, devoid of pretense, uncalculated, simply sincere. Ellie remained silent. Her presence spoke volumes. She moved gracefully toward the quaint kitchen, nestled in the corner of the serene country cottage. She filled 2 glasses with water, her hands steady, thoughts trailing behind him. Silence lingers. I needed space, she said softly, placing a glass on the counter that separated them. I realized I had to discover my identity beyond your realm. And now, he inquired. She turned, glanced at him, and for the first time felt a sense of ease wash over her. I'm still myself, she stated. I have no nostalgia for the conference calls, the sidelong looks, or navigating that office as if I were merely a whisper in motion. Yet, there is a certain something I find myself longing for. His brow arched ever so slightly. She remarked, prior to the stillness, prior to the harm that required mending. A subtle warmth flickered across his face, accompanied by a fleeting, authentic smile. It wasn't the sort that would grab attention in the news. It was the kind you offered to someone who had already glimpsed your darkness. I didn't expect you to say that, he remarked, yet I held on to hope. She took a sip of the water, then placed the glass down and wrapped her arms around herself softly. If I come back, it won't be to the same seat. I will not be positioned behind you. Julian gave a slow nod. It would be unwise to do so. I wish to stand alongside you as a peer. That is precisely what we create. Their return to the city was unceremonious. Silence prevails, devoid of announcements or media releases. 2 individuals deliberately stepping back into the chaos, this time with purpose. Ellie never returned to her old desk again. Julian presented her as the Director of Strategic Vision, a title that might baffle those on the outside, yet resonated with clarity among the team, signaling her role as a leader. Whispers lingered among the crowd. Yet this time she held her gaze steady. And this time Julian found his voice. He sought her perspective, supported her decisions, and paid attention. He remained calm, maintaining his defenses. Yet, there were instances, subtle and unexpected, when something within him shattered. At times, he would stay in her office, savoring his coffee while she shared her thoughts on literature, aspirations, and topics that drifted far from the confines of boardrooms and spreadsheets. Even Mia remarked on how much lighter you seem now, she said one evening while Ellie stirred pasta on the stove. As if a weight has been lifted, you can finally breathe freely. Perhaps she had. The true transformation unfolded weeks later. The strategy meeting lingered into the night, the office cloaked in shadows. The city beyond shimmered in silence, its skyscrapers twinkling like distant stars. Ellie stood at the window, arms folded, reflecting on the journey she had taken since the rooftop of the Halcyon. Julian entered, his tie casually undone, cradling 2 takeaway coffees in his hands. He presented her with one. "Are you doing well?" he inquired. She paused before replying, her voice gentle. "There are moments when I reflect on that night we first crossed paths, and I can't help but ponder how things might have unfolded had you not misjudged me." Julian moved in closer. "You would have left," he remarked. "Nor would I have pursued." She likely nodded. "And we would have missed out on this entirely." He savored a sip of coffee. "Perhaps, just perhaps, I find a sense of gratitude in my mistakes." She faced him, her gaze unwavering. "You show no fear. I'll keep that in mind." He offered a slight, lopsided grin. "You already possess that ability. You've offered your apologies 3 times already." Ellie whispered, her lips curving not in laughter, but in astonishment. Julian stood beside her, close enough for her to sense the subtle gravity of his presence, yet maintaining a respectful distance. They sat side by side, observing the city lights dance and shimmer beyond the glass. Underneath the hum of the cityscape, a gentle silence enveloped, steady and comforting, yet devoid of any pain. This space embraced the possibility of restoration. "He mentioned that he still owes you a genuine one." She cast a sidelong glance at him, while he maintained his focus ahead. "For allowing the quiet to resonate more profoundly than I ever had the courage to. For failing to intervene during the tempest when I ought to have, and for presuming your strength simply because you remained unshattered." Ellie cast her gaze down to the coffee cup cradled in her hands. It had lost its warmth, yet she clung to it as if it still held significance. "Are you saying that?" she inquired. "Do I?" She allowed the silence to linger for a moment more. "Very well, I shall accept your apology, but only under one stipulation." "What is that?" "Stop approaching emotions as if they're transactions to negotiate." A weary, dry chuckle slipped from his lips, the sort that originated from a place of sincerity, perhaps requiring a bit of refinement. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered gently. "There's plenty of time ahead of us." Julian pivoted completely, now confronting her unprotected. "He remarked that you were the sole individual who didn't attempt to win him over. You remained unperturbed when I overlooked your presence. Your mere presence lingered, sending shivers down my spine, filling me with dread." He confessed, "I've lived the majority of my life encased in glass. Yet you managed to enter without even requesting a key." Ellie locked eyes with him. "I wasn't attempting to. I understand." For once, the quiet between them felt comfortable. It didn't require filling. It merely nestled softly like a whisper. As he extended his hand towards hers, with a deliberate and gentle inquiry, she remained still, not retreating. Her fingers intertwined with his, as if they were meant to be together. Half a year later, the company revealed its most daring endeavor. However, a global endeavor unfolds, encompassing 5 cities, 3 sectors, and a level of intricacy that few would be bold enough to engage with. Ellie stood near the stage, poised at the launch gala, headset in place and clipboard in hand, exuding calm and focus as she took command of the event. She had shed the role of the assistant, no longer lingering in the background. She was finally visible. As the last applause faded and the audience started to disperse, she gracefully descended the side steps, poised to vanish into the shadows. Yet Julian was already there, waiting. He extended a glass of water, accompanied by a subtle smile, serene yet rich with significance. "Your opportunity slipped away up there." "I wasn't looking for one," she replied, as he tilted his head slightly. "Perhaps, yet it discovered you regardless." She surveyed the space. "Where is your security?" He stated that he had departed from them. "That certainly doesn't seem like your usual self." "I am in the process of reinventing myself." "Am I familiar with him?" she playfully taunted. Julian moved in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I believe you are the catalyst for his existence." The atmosphere was alive with melodies and gentle chuckles. Yet, amidst them, there lingered only silence. I once thought that control was all that mattered, he remarked. But then you entered my world like an unfixable mistake, and you turned into the one thing I feared losing the most. Ellie's demeanor became gentler. I once believed that power manifested in grand offices and shimmering glass walls, she remarked. But now I understand it's about journeying alongside someone who never required you to demonstrate your value. Julian delved into his pocket and retrieved a small velvet box. A delicate necklace shimmered in the light, the very one he had once gifted her, now adorned with a small star charm added to the chain. She caressed it softly. What is the significance of the star? For you never required my universe to glow, he remarked. Your light was your own to bring. She inhaled deeply, then intertwined her fingers with his, and they moved ahead, not toward an ideal future, but toward one they would craft side by side. A narrative of trust built over time, of unspoken understandings, of a love that thrived in quiet authenticity. Not every tale starts with a bang. They start in darkness with an error, a falter, a quiet that resonates far beyond its time. However, the truly remarkable individuals are not those who come into the world flawless. They are the ones we decide to remain with, even in the face of flaws, through the miscommunications, long after the most challenging moments have revealed themselves. That was the tale in which Ellie and Julian became entwined. Not one crafted in bold statements or assurances, but in the manner he appeared, never requesting her return. In the manner of her staying, it was not due to a lack of alternatives, but rather, for the first time, she desired to belong on her own terms. Time slipped away. They crafted a fresh cadence, not dictated by deadlines, but by moments of stillness, by faith, by twilight hours, where the quiet no longer sliced like a knife, but lingered like a melody half forgotten and ultimately rediscovered. Julian discovered the art of inquiry, while Ellie embraced the vulnerability of responding without defenses. Occasionally, when the city hushed to a gentle lull, they would take the longer route home, hands clasped together, content to let the silence envelop them, their connection speaking volumes without a single word. She continued to wear the necklace not for its past significance, but for its current meaning, not as an apology, but as a sign of arrival. On their anniversary, Julian opted for something simple rather than extravagant. No rooftop gardens, no catered dinners, just a note nestled in the corner of her desk, penned in his neat handwriting. I appreciate your commitment to the narrative. Hours later, she discovered him poised in the doorway of the bookstore. They had aided in reviving the one that exuded the scent of aged pages and potential. And she remarked that there had never been a page I wished to turn more slowly. No vows were necessary. Their silence spoke volumes, for often the most profound affection is the one that seeks no recognition. It simply remains. Certain tales of affection start with blooms and vows. Yet, those that linger in our minds frequently start with a miscommunication, a pause, a fleeting instance of error in judgment. This was never about achieving flawlessness. It was a story of two individuals discovering that true love isn't forged in corporate meetings or romantic settings. It resides in the stillness, in the act of letting go, in the decision to remain when departing seems simpler. Ellie and Julian encountered one another at a time when they were not at their finest. Amidst the chaos, in the shadows, in the uncertainties, they discovered one another. From that point, they decided to create something tangible. Ultimately, the most profound love is not the one that remained unscathed. It's the one that broke apart yet still decided to start anew. If this narrative resonated with you, if it brought to mind the strength and elegance of resilience, please remember to give this video a thumbs up. Pass it along to someone who values new beginnings and join our channel for more narratives that resonate deeply. Until we meet again, remain compassionate, stay receptive, and always hold on to the subtle enchantment of enduring love.